we really need to go through a brief history of film distribution, of movie distribution over the years, because it's evolved. And when I was breaking down this information, the evolution is
Mhm.
fascinating. It
Yeah.
truly is. So let's go ahead and jump into. It's gonna throw a lot of information at you. So
Okay.
buckle up. We're gonna get into a brief history of film and movie distribution over the years, all the way back to the 1920s.
Brief. Brief.
All right.
Brief. I'm gonna
I
say
have a
brief
bunch
one
of
more time.
slides here.
Brief.
Okay. So let's see. Early distributions and World War II impact. All right. So 1929, despite the Wall Street crash, 60 through 80 million Americans continue visiting movie theaters weekly. All right. So this is a big deal. Movie theaters was the primary way of getting entertainment at all. All right. Back in this time, in 1929 and 1930, there was only like in the thousands of people that even had any access to any kind of TV in home. Like it was extremely rare, and broadcast didn't really pop off till like the 40s. All right. Like where it was more mass produced. 1939, cinemas in the UK closed temporarily when World War II was declared, but reopened a week later. So this is just kind of like big moments in cinema distribution. 1941, movie attendances boomed due to leisure activities, bands, and morale-boosting films like the 49th Parallel. I don't know what that movie is or what that even is. I think it's a movie. Films like the 49th Parallel.
Yeah.
But during the war, right, or after the war, people wanted morale boosting. There is also, like, side note, a ton of government CIA propaganda being put out in the cinemas, especially during and post-war. So it was like the way to influence the public, but it was all through theaters. Like theaters are the place. It would be the thing where it's like, go to the Saturday night at the movies. You know what I mean? That old song, Saturday night at the movies. And you go and hand them a nickel. You know what I mean? You give them a nickel and you go watch your movie.
Why do I feel like you hand them a nickel for your movie and then you get your peanuts for some reason?
I'm like eating peanuts while watching
eating peanuts while watching a movie. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. I don't know.
All right, 1946, record-breaking profits as 2/3 of Americans attended movies weekly post World War II. So 2/3, so 2 out of every 3 people were 2 out of every 3 Americans were going to the movies weekly to watch something, right?
I mean, you know, everybody knows you grab your beautiful dame and go have a Saturday night date at the movies.
Who cares what picture you see, man? Just go to the movies, dude. All right. So weekly is the huge. So this is like the peak theater experience. It is not where the most money is because the profits were still figuring it out. But this is the most popular cinema theater experiences have ever been, right? As far as human population to people's butts in the theater. You know what I mean? Like it's never been more popular. Now, there's been more people at the theater as the population has grown. But as far as just straight the amount of the human population you're getting in theaters, this was the peak, right?
I don't want to break down. I don't want to go on a rabbit hole with asking the question, but I'm just going to ask it real quick. This was around the same time that sound started coming into.
Sound had been around
in pictures, or was it silent before this?
It was black and white. It was black and white.
It was still
the
black
30s.
And white.
The 30s were the 30s and maybe early 40s were kind of some didn't have sound, but by the 40s they had sound. Let me do a quick Google search just to confirm.
I'm just thinking of, you know, Singing in the Rain, that era when, and also everybody I'm seeing World War II, and I know that was a big time where people were coming back.
Oh, yeah.
I know people were thinking that they weren't as entertained by movies as much because they had seen so much with the war and so much death and
this
stuff that they had to
nine,
ramp up. And
1927, October 6th of 1927,
So,
Warner
yeah,
Bros. Released The Jazz Singer, the first feature-length film to incorporate synchronized sound for sequences of dialogue. All right, so
we're
the 20s, we had
10 years off.
we
We're
had
12 years off
music
here.
and dialogue in the theaters, in movies from the 20s. Okay,
Late
all right,
20s though.
from the late 20s, from 27, which we're coming up in just a few years. We will be at the 100-year anniversary of movies having sound.
That's fun. Yeah.
Yeah, that is fun. It's crazy. We're not even at 100 years of movies having sound yet. So the 60s through the 70s, home video and the format war. All right.
Okay.
So in 1965, Eastman Kodak launched the Super 8 format, enabling home movies making and film playback at home. Okay. The first instance. All right. The first instance. So this is not, we're not talking about cable TV. All right.
Mhm.
Which for reference, let me see what year did TV in homes come about. All right. In 1946 to some 12 million, let's see, number of television sets in the use rose from 6,000 in 1946 to 12 million by 1951. And so our dad was born, I believe, in 57, I think 56 or 57. All right.
Mhm.
And so he grew up when he was young into being a teenager. His form of entertainment was black and white cable TV, right?
Yeah. And it's crazy too. I'm probably behind. It was probably way back before this, but like people didn't have the line from like the cable to come into their house and play a TV. So they literally had to like run a line because that wasn't a thing.
Well,
Yeah.
they had the antenna, right? So they invented the I don't know if it was the rabbit ears, if that's super old technology, or if that was consistent. But there was the antenna because they figured out how to send frequency rate waves, right, for TV and everything. But yeah, I don't know, man. It would have been crazy to actually just live in those days to understand the intricacies. Right now, we just have to have conversations with older people. But in 65, Kodak created the Super 8 film, which was a big deal because it's the first time that unless you had like a projector system and you bought a really expensive reel that wasn't mass produced, so you got your hands on something special, this is the first time that people were playing back like recorded, like duplicated or recorded stuff that wasn't cable TV. Okay. 1995, Sony released, no, 1975, not 95. 1975, Sony released the Betamax, allowing movie playback and live TV recording. Okay.
Mhm.
Sparking the home video revolution.
This is interesting. I'm going back a tiny bit, and I don't mean to keep jumping around, but what year did you say cable was coming into people's homes? Like
Between 1946 and 1951.
Okay, I was gonna say throw in a little joke in there about I Love Lucy, and that started in 1951 was when I Love Lucy went on air.
Right. Which, by the way, if you guys want to see what a Betamax look like, let's see. This is what it looks like. a Betamax.
Oh yeah.
All right. So that was in 1975. In the late 1970s, JVC launched VHS. We know what that is. VHS, entertaining the market after Betamax and starting the first format war. Okay. So this is when VHS popped into the scene and stuck around until the 2000s. All right. So VHS was the thing for 40 years. It looks that way.
40 years. That's crazy. I mean, we know VHS.
Maybe 30 because late 70s, right? Maybe more like 30 years.
And I know when DVDs started becoming a thing, we were still into the VHS because DVDs would get scratched and they weren't great. That technology took a while for them.
That's why they quickly created Blu-ray.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but also like it's just DVDs weren't great technology.
All right, we're going to get to DVDs. Hold on. All right, so 1978, VHS became the UK's standard for home video. 1979, video rentals and straight-to-video releases boosted profits from Hollywood studios, recouping losses from theater flops. So this is the first time by 1979, putting movies on VHS and getting people's to buy VHS tapes of movies as well as renting VHS tapes from places like, as we knew, Blockbuster, but most of the time kind of like what you would see on Stranger Things. Steve goes and works at a video rental place. That was the way for Hollywood to recoup losses if a theater experience did not work. So that leads us to the problem we have today, but not quite. We have more to go, but that's reminiscent of this is a issue that is re-showing its head again. You know what I mean?
It's crazy because you have 1978 and 1979, and Star Wars was released 1977.
Yeah.
1 year before. I guess VHS was in the 70s.
This VHS started in the late 70s. So,
77 is when Star Wars came out.
Yeah. So it is Star Wars came out right as VHS is beginning, basically.
Yeah.
All right. So the 1990s. All right. Titanic, VHS dominance and DVD emergence. All right. Titanic premiered staying in theaters for 10 months and launched a 50 million home video campaign. All right, so that means $50 million campaign invested into VHS. All right. 1999 to 2000, Titanic became the first DVD to sell 1 million copies, polarizing DVDs with special features. So Titanic was the big first success for DVD sales as DVDs were being created. All right. So Titanic not only was successful with being the highest grossing film for a long time in theaters, but it also was the first success story to launch the DVD format. All right. 2001 DVD sales overtook VHS, and we remember that. Do you remember that happening?
Yes,
we were there for that, obviously.
We were young. I do remember.
I remember going to Walmart at the age of 6, 7, and 8. All right. I remember seeing.
For us, DVDs, we were getting into DVDs 2003, maybe. Because I remember in 2000, we were really young, but 2002, maybe even 2003 still, we were getting VHS copies of things.
Well, the market still created VHS copies of stuff, right?
Yeah.
The market hadn't stopped VHS yet, just because DVDs were rising in popularity.
Yes.
So I remember going to Walmart, seeing VHS copies and DVD copies of movies, you know?
Yes.
I remember that. I was like 7, but I remember that happening.
I remember that.
And then we get to 2001 to 2007, all right, to the digital shift. Mm-hmm. So in late 2021, fantasy films dominated the box office. So Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings became major hits. That's kind of a big genre moment for films. And it kind of took us in a big direction going into the early 2000s as far as movies go. And it also kind of shaped what movies were going to be made for the next 2 decades in some capacity. 2006, believe it or not, Apple was the first one. Apple added movies to iTunes, beginning digital film sales. So Apple on iTunes was the first time that a digital movie sale started happening. And it wasn't either in theaters or on VHS or DVDs, right?
Yeah, you could buy it for your Apple. You could buy it for your Apple Touch. Apple Touch. iPod Touch. And then, or your iPod in general, your small screen, your like 4x4 screen, not even 4x, like 2x2 screen. You could buy a movie and watch it on there.
Yeah, but they were onto something, man. They knew where the world was going. All right.
Yeah.
By 2007, Netflix introduced streaming, shifting from a DVD subscription service to digital streaming. So if you don't know the history of Netflix, Netflix was like Blockbuster, like a movie DVD rental thing, except they didn't have locations where you go and select. You online, you ordered a rental and it was shipped to you and you had to ship it back. That was how Netflix started. And then Netflix introduced, we are going to start streaming movies like rentals, but you're watching them online rather than us sending you a DVD. Okay. Yeah. Which oddly enough, I think it was like in 2000, I think it was 2022. I think it was just like 2 years ago. Yeah. Netflix officially stopped that service. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is nuts.
Well, they were trying to get their DVDs back. Someone still had DVDs out for rent, and they're waiting for them to send it back so they can collect them.
It took a while.
That fee for you having it so much.
It took a while. 2010s to 2020s. So this is getting right up to where we are today.
Okay.
The streaming competition and COVID-19 impact. All right. Netflix launched its first original content, investing heavily in streaming exclusive. So again, Netflix changed the industry by saying we're not just renting movies digitally to watch online. We're now a studio that makes our own Netflix content, right? That launched every studio into wanting to do the same thing. 2019, all right, Netflix had nearly doubled the subscribers of Amazon Prime with 125 million. So by this time, obviously Amazon Prime, Disney Plus was around by 2019, yeah. Or they started in 2019.
Yeah, it was.
No, there was talks because remember we started our podcast right at the beginning of 2019, remember? And we were theorizing what a subscription service for Disney would look like.
They were in talks back in 2017 when I was working at WBTV. Yeah. That was a news story that we had. I remember we talked about Disney launching their own,
but it wasn't launched
streaming service. Yeah, till many years later.
It was launched when Mandalorian season 1 was launched because that was the big thing. It all happened at the same time. 2020, COVID-19 accelerated streaming as theaters closed globally, all right? And then 2020's COVID-19 forced a shift towards streaming, leading to questions about cinema's sustainability. So that's the timeline of events. It's a lot, but that is a very basic, brief picture of movie distribution history.